So WordPress was basically scratching a personal itch. I was blogging myself using software called Movable Type, and at the time I was really annoyed with having to rebuild things and configure CGI bins and all this stuff. And I had sort of discovered PHP with some side projects, and still the software packages out there frustrated me. I felt this is too hard, this is too difficult to set up, and it didn't do some things that I liked. So I didn't really code at the time, but I started picking some up. And as WordPress matured, I picked up hopefully a little bit more. And in the beginning, WordPress was sort of unified by a philosophy that code is poetry, and that the software should be small and elegant. And fortunately, that philosophy attracted a number of folks, high-quality folks, who contributed to the open source project and made WordPress what it is today. No, not at all. It was basically, in fact, in the beginning, I couldn't get anyone to use it, so I had to install it for all my friends who hadn't had blogs before, just to get like the first 5 users. Even the developers weren't using it. Yeah, so it was kind of, it was a slow start, but since it's very successful now, people assume it was an overnight thing, but in fact, overnight successes often take many years, and WordPress is a good example of that. There are things we don't do and probably will never do, such as email. I just don't ever want to touch that. So in our view, especially since we partner with a lot of shared hosts, we try to draw a clear line between where their business is always going to be and where our business is growing. So we're not going to butt heads in the future. I still think there's a thing, for example, WordPress.com has 1 million blogs on it. But if you wanted forum software, or if you wanted some sort of weird something else that's not WordPress, we're not really the place for that. You really need your own host. So I feel like there's always going to be a good space for that. What it is probably eating into is probably the higher end of the market. So folks who have like people.com actually just move their blog over to WordPress. And so that's replacing several dedicated servers, and now they're just on our sort of cluster grid, and they just don't worry about things. So I think at the higher end of the market, it's going to eat more than the lower end of the market. Well, I would say it's very pessimistic. So the assumption in our infrastructure is that all the boxes suck, so they're going to go down, that they're cheap and slow, and that network is unreliable. So if you assume those three things, you can sort of build a system which accounts for all those and hopefully deals with them in elegant ways. And so that's basically what we developed. I think a business without a blog in 2 years is going to be like a business without an email address today. It's sort of going to be a baseline that you expect from everyone. And the key thing to remember is blogs are somewhat of reactions to sort of the abstract, generic marketing spew that most companies have all over their websites and the brochures and everything, things that are very impersonal, they don't really talk to you. And blogs are the complete opposite. It's one person talking to another person, and that's where the connection is, and that's why they're part of the fastest growing, they're the fastest growing part of the internet. Traffic on blogs is growing faster than media sites, news.com, all these guys are relatively flat. Blogs are going through the roof. And so as businesses embrace blogging as a platform, using WordPress or Blogger or whatever it is, don't take that old method of speaking to folks to this new medium. Try to tell stories and speak as, use first person, say I, say we, talk about the people. And that, I think, is the most important lesson that people can take from one to the other. Especially small businesses have really interesting stories and really interesting people behind them. Why do they try to appear like in a Microsoft with 90,000 employees or something? In fact, it's funny I mentioned Microsoft because they're actually one of the best companies blogging out there right now, which I would have never predicted in my life. For them it's not a company blog, they allow the employees to blog. And they basically say, say whatever you like. The normal things that govern HR, govern the blogs, don't embarrass yourself, have some common sense, and that's it. We're not going to monitor it, we're not going to police it, everything else. And it's been enormously successful, and a company that it was sort of as hated as much as Microsoft was, has managed to turn that around and show that there's real people behind that. There's people with faces and families and needs and wants, and they're trying to do the best. So that's really powerful. One of the things we've been doing with the company Automatic is taking things. WordPress is two things. It's both software you can download and install and a hosted service at WordPress.com. And there's certain things that lend themselves well to centralized hosting services, and certain things that lend themselves well to being distributed. So we have 1 million blogs on WordPress.com now, and somewhere between 1 to 2 million that host themselves. What we're trying to do is connect the services between the two. So the first we did that was with our anti-spam technology, Kismet, which allows sort of the intelligence of the network, of everyone using it, to protect everyone from spam, not unlike a CloudMark for email. So that works fantastically well. It's been about a year and a half now. It's blocked well over 1 billion spams. It's blocking tens of millions a day. The latest one we just rolled out a couple weeks ago was actually a stat system. So statistics that are meaningful, that aren't just web log analysis, aren't that useful to writers, to people. And logging things to a database, as many statistics programs attempt to do, is very expensive on shared server resources. So we have a centralized system, not unlike a Google Analytics or a stat counter, which can sort of aggregate all the stats, update them almost instantly, but only show you the things that are most interesting to you as a writer. Which of your posts or pages are getting the most hits? Where are people coming from? And where are they going after they leave? So we tried to distill a very complicated thing, statistics, into the simplest possible thing that could work, and it's been going very well. What we found is, so across 1 million and something blogs on WordPress.com, we do about 8 or 9 million page views per day, which ranks us fairly high. I think we're in the top 50 websites. Of the, I think about 10,000 WordPress.org websites that have used the stat system so far, they're doing about 2.5 million page views a day. So a small fraction of a percent of the number of blogs that we have are doing about 1/4 of the pages. So I'm actually really excited if we can expand the stat system to be out to the 1 million or 2 million blogs that are on WordPress.org, sort of what that audience is and what it looks like. So I think that's a story that hasn't really been told a lot yet. I'm excited to explore it. I think in the very beginning, WordPress is actually very late to the blogging marketplace. In fact, when we started, people said there were too many blogging software and there was no room for another. So in the beginning, what we were doing was just imitating the features that were already there. And open source is usually pretty good at that. After we had sort of hit the common base of what all the existing software was doing at the time, we started really listening and seeing what the biggest pain points were. And that led us to develop things like podcasting support, before podcasting was a word. Our Pages feature, which allowed sort of management of content outside of the blog. Feeds for everything, including searches and categories and multiple categories and subcategories and tags and all these sort of features that just didn't exist at the time. Now, other platforms are starting to catch up with that and duplicating a lot of the features, in some cases even duplicating our APIs. So that playing field is leveling to a point. But at the same time, we're working on what we believe is the next generation. So media handling. You mentioned video and how the video casters have really embraced WordPress as a platform. It's because we have, by itself, WordPress is just a blank canvas, right? It's a tool that you bring something colorful to, and really what's interesting is what you do with it. At a systems level, it's also somewhat bland. It's as small and light as fast as possible, but has a plugin architecture, a theme architecture that allows you to do really exciting things, not unlike Firefox does with extensions. So for people whose audience might be at the leading edge, like video casters, I think are right now like at the early adopter phase. It's not even, a percent of the population yet is doing this. But they're able to develop their own plugins and do their own workarounds for what's really complex problems, which is putting video in multiple formats on the web and having feeds for it and everything like that. And that's sort of the beauty, that they're able to take the core WordPress platform, build on top of it, and create a really unique product. And that is, I think, where the beauty is. And over time, what we can do is look to what the most popular plugins is and what's getting the most adoption and say, okay, how can we improve that and put that into core products, because it's addressing, like an 80-20 rule. It's addressing 80% of our users.